Hello and welcome to this new 2025 season series of the Stories in the Room, which are conversations with incredible industry leaders from the Speakers Bureau's world and management agencies. And of course, I'm joined here by my wonderful friend and incredible communications architect, leadership speaker, Dr. Rod Berger. Rod, welcome, my friend, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well. We actually can say we're into season 2.
Oh, this is yes. And what an incredible, thank you so much for being a part of this series last year. I mean, the conception of this really came from conversations you and I were having. You are a big proponent of storytelling, a global storyteller. We know that stories are the currency in the room, as you say. And to just refresh people on that, can you just share a little bit again about your ideas behind that and what you're seeing out there in terms of the companies you're speaking with as well, and how important storytelling has always been, but we're coming back home to it even in a bigger way?
We are, and I do want to say real quickly, just because I want to be, and I'm sure you and I and our guests today probably have connections in this way, but sending positive thoughts to my old hometown of Los Angeles and the folks that are dealing with those fires. I don't know if you're getting these updates, but it's some
Yeah.
pretty apocalyptic stuff that is pretty scary. And I'll share this one quick anecdote that you really know you live there when you walk out to your car and you see something on your windshield. And I'm from Detroit, and I would used to see snow. But when you see ash on a windshield, it definitely changes perspective and it changes the story. So that's a very awkward way of sort of segueing in. But, you're right, Marjana, that storytelling it feels like it's everywhere now. I mean, I woke up yesterday to a message on LinkedIn from someone I haven't talked to in the last, 10 years, who said they desperately needed some resources on storytelling for their business, their industry. And so, whether they know how to tell a story or they're seeking out storytelling resources, it is a key element of the way in which we're conducting business, the way in which we're educating our youth, the way we are advocating in our communities. And so, for me, I'm a kid in a candy shop, and so these, experiences with you and this, stories in the room show, I think, are really important because I harken back to when I first started public speaking as a teenager. And I remember trying to square how could I share a story about my experience and relate that to an audience in a way that felt unique and exclusive to that very moment in time. And I still wrestle with that, and I think it's a good thing to constantly wrestle with. So this is just a joy to be a part of, and I look forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I keep saying, I think in this industry, in the speaking industry, there's an art to almost the water cooler talk version of storytelling,
Right.
being able to share the stories and strategies of the incredible leaders in this industry, incredible speakers that we all talk about. And I think that's something that we try to do here is with these conversations, we are trying to get down to those kernels that people can just share back easily, that are memorable. And I think that's something that we're going to be able to get today with our guests today as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you that, we talked a little bit sort of off air, as they might say, makes us sound cooler maybe than we are. Or I'll speak for myself, Rajan. But this notion of whether we have a story we don't know how to share that story or even find it. I love that our industry has an opportunity to extract the story because it's
Mhm.
not just about dictating. It's about being able to capture a story and also not just of ourselves and how that can have an impact, but how can we do that on stage with these audiences, with people that are leading and making a difference as change makers. And so, that's super exciting for me because I get to weave in my interviewing. But I also think it keeps us from being sort of one trick ponies, which I think people who don't understand the industry think everybody has the 7 steps to greatness. And it's not really,
Yeah.
it's not about that at all. Right.
Yeah. Definitely more nuanced.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And before we bring in our guest today, just one last question for you here. What is the story for this year for 2025 for Dr. Rod Berger that you'd
Oh,
like to share with us?
the story. Well, fingers crossed that the television show that I'm working on with the Jim Henson Company is greenlit. We've got some pretty amazing meetings coming up, so let's hope that all works. It's another way to tell stories, and I'm very excited about the announcement that I made today on LinkedIn about my formal collaboration with WSB, Washington Speakers Bureau, and Ryan and the folks over there who understand, which is really exciting, the power of that facilitated keynote, and looking at a roster and saying, wait a minute, what else can we farm from this in a way that creates opportunity for an audience in a way that maybe they haven't experienced in the past. So between that and then send good vibes, Marjana, because my manuscript is due third week of March for my book with Wiley on storytelling, and it will be a race to the finish. Hopefully they're not listening. I mean, but they expect that. So that's my 2025 so far.
Ooh, that is jam-packed, my friend, jam-packed. I'm going to be paying attention to all of that. So, anyway, without further ado, as they say, I'm Michelle Joyce. She is a powerhouse in the speaking industry. And as the founder of her exclusive speaker management company, the Michelle Joyce Speakers, and she is current president of the International Association of Speakers Bureaus. She's spent 25 years in the industry. And I can personally share that this woman is someone who is truly trusted. I mean, in this industry, you have people that are deep diving in so many ways, that work with speakers, work with our industry colleagues, are very busy. And it's those exceptional colleagues who really take the time to be present, to offer their support, to offer their assistance. She's won many awards through IASB because of who she is, how she shows up. And I'm so grateful to know her as a friend, as a colleague, and as a true leader of the speaking industry. So with that, I would like to welcome Michelle Joyce.
Oh my goodness. Thank you
Hi,
so
Michelle.
much. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you so much for taking time to join us. It is so exciting to kick this season off with you, Michelle, because you are president this year of the International Association of Speakers Bureaus and management companies. And it really is an incredible association. We're so glad to have you at the helm. And I'm sure you have a lot of great ideas for what we need to do this year, how far we've come as an industry. And, before, Rod takes off with the magic of his conversation with you, I'd love to just level set for 2025 on some of those things that you're thinking about for our industry and what you believe makes this industry so special.
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here, and that intro was very lovely. Thank you. It's an exciting time to be in this industry. There are so many things that are going to be taking place over the next few years. I'm excited to be part of that trajectory. We've had a lot of growth in this industry over the past few years, and I'm excited to see what our association is going to put forth. We have a lot of cool things happening, lots of exciting changes. So I would say stay tuned on that, but I'm really excited to be part of it.
That's so great. And, this is the year, I think, that as an industry, all of our colleagues, we're going to be thinking about storytelling a lot more. I'm already seeing it. I know you're seeing it, Michelle, and Rod, you're probably seeing it as well. Just out on LinkedIn, a lot more people are coming forward, sharing their stories, sharing great wins, talking about challenges, talking about opportunities. Is this something that you're seeing more of as well, Michelle? And as you're having conversation with colleagues, that everyone in the industry wants to be a better storyteller about our own agencies, but also the industry at large?
Absolutely. I think storytelling is an essential part of business these days. It used to be more of like a marketing thing, but now we're actually getting requests for leadership speakers to say, could you train our leaders on telling their story? People want to connect with brands. They want to connect with people. And at the end of the day, they connect with the story. I have a mentor that used to say facts and figures are forgotten, but stories are retold forever. And that's because that's that emotional connection. So we're seeing it all in every topic, in every event, with every speaker.
Yeah. Rod, I mean, here we are, right? Story is the currency. How do you pick it up from there?
Well, I want to kind of go back to something that I briefly mentioned just in our banter there, Marjana. And Michelle, it's so nice to spend some time with you, and what a nice way to kick off our second season here at Stories in the Room, which was that notion of that one-trick pony, sort of the public perception, right? We've got the industry, and we're going to dive into that and sort of where we think we're going, how we can improve, how do we sort of combat perception, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. But what I love about your background, Michelle, is that you value, this is me speaking, but I think that you value working almost every job in the restaurant, meaning that you don't just take one approach to it, and that's what your sort of role is well, now you're president of the IASB, right? And you've got your own agency. You've worked in the kitchen, in the front of the house, you've hosted, you've done all these things. And if sort of to draw that even closer, I love what you were doing at Bowling Green, right? So let's go back to Bowling Green in the late 90s, right? You're homecoming queen, you're part of a sorority, you're an RA. Now, so for me, this is just me nerding out. That tells me a lot about who you are and understanding the impact or the footprint that you have on the environment around you. And that really is exciting to me from a storytelling perspective and where you are in a leadership role, because you're not coming at it from where I think people who don't know the industry would think that you might be, which is we just have to have speakers out there that are giving us their menu, their prescriptive sort of speech. There's something much more like community driven in your background. Am I reading the room right with you? Is that something that's near and dear to your core, or is it something else?
It is, and it's very kind of you to say that. I think in order to be a trusted expert in this industry, you have to know every aspect of the industry. I own a successful management company and I still take out the trash, right? Like that's just, you have to understand all of the elements. And when I was first learning the business, I just was a sponge. I couldn't get enough of it. I would listen in on sales calls. I would read books. I would go see speakers. I'm just a lifelong student of the business. And I think in order to remain relevant and successful in this industry, you have to do that. You can't really take your foot off the gas and rest on your laurels. You have to just stay current because things change, right? You all know there's buzzwords one year and then next year that's gone and now we're on to something else. And so you have to constantly be in touch with what's going on out there, in touch with what meeting planners are looking for, asking for what's new, what's exciting, just how to always stay ahead of the curve.
How did you avoid the trap? Because I think that there's this incredible trap in this industry where, regardless of sort of where you are on the playing field of public speaking and events, it's that sort of pull that you have to have an answer. You've got to know, this is my book, this is my speech, this is my approach, these are my speakers. But I'm hearing more like you as a student of the game, that you actually relish sort of getting your hands dirty and saying, I need to understand this from all angles. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to be very good at forecasting anything, let alone my own agency's hopefully successful path and that of the IASB. How have you avoided falling into that trap?
I think you have to remain flexible, first of all. My team and we're on the front lines when we're talking to meeting planners. And so we are constantly gathering data. We are constantly hearing what they want, what doesn't work, what hasn't worked in the past, what are they looking for? And then that's something I take back and relay to my team. And we're constantly reviewing things to stay current. So, if a speaker is positioned one way and I'm like, oh, that's not really the buzzword right now. The buzzword is this, which is very complementary to what you're doing. We might shift gears. We might beta test that in the market. But I think you have to just stay flexible as well and not get so dialed into one thing. You want to go where the need is and you want to be able to have the information that people are requesting.
And sometimes I would go as far as to say you have to almost push back against gale force winds, right? Or trends that maybe you're picking up and say, I don't know if that's going to be lasting very long.
Right.
Tell me about your relationship to trusting your gut. Like, when did that start? Was this high school? I mean, when was it? Because I think that really good leaders, whether they admit it or not, there's something about they can read the room. There's a feeling that they get, and they've got to run with that. Otherwise, they become too regimented and rote in their approach. And yet this is a relational business, right? This is personality driven. It's like, I want to spend time with that speaker. I want to go have lunch with that speaker. I want to learn from them. I want to share my own story.
I think trusting your gut in business is one of the most important things a business owner can do. And I think so many times people go against it. They think they're supposed to be doing something one way, or someone has told them to do something. I'll tell you, I listen to my gut on a regular basis. If something doesn't feel right, I don't do it. I would tell people I'm excellent at saying no to things. It has to feel right. It has to align with core values and belief systems. And I think so many people are afraid to push back against those gale force winds and to push back when something doesn't feel right. But I will tell you, I have always led with that. And I think it has served me very well. I think that's such an incredible lesson for younger kids, especially young females. I think you need to really understand you have an inner voice and learn how to listen to it.
I love that you brought up voice, because maybe it's because of the book stuff that I'm working on. But agents in that world, they're always talking about an author's voice, and when they find it, it's gold to them. But I love that you're looking at it from a generational sort of transfer perspective. And I know that you're a co-lead of a Girl Scout troop, and that you're leading these future girl bosses. I'm the father of a future girl boss, so I fully appreciate and understand that perspective. Talk about that, if that's the backdrop, the responsibility. But I'm talking about sort of in the corners of your mind when you turn the lights out at night, meaning you're running your own successful agency, and now you're the president of IASB. That's a really interesting mix, because as people start to get to know you and look up to you from your perspective in the industry and the association, does that put added pressure? How do you balance that out with being that leader, that voice, and also still maintaining sort of status quo and also growing for your own team? That feels like it's got to be a bit of a juggle.
It's a lot. And I used to always joke with people that people look at my calendar and they would freak out. But for me, that's normal, right? Like I have always been the kid that was in every activity. I was a straight A student. I was an athlete. I was involved in everything. I don't think I know any other way to do it. So for me, it's very natural. And I've learned over the years that's not natural for a lot of people. One of the things I think I do very well is whichever role I'm in at the time, I'm incredibly present. I've learned to be very present, whether I'm leader of the company or speaker agent or mom or Girl Scout leader, friend, wife, daughter, all of those things. You have to learn to be very present in the moment. And it is an incredible responsibility. The other thing I would add is that for me, with regard to leadership, I've always come from a place of service.
So, and is that sort of that Southern roots? I know you're down the road from me here in Nashville. You're down in North Carolina. Tell me about sort of that regional advantage you may have based on your personality. Like, I saw that immediately when I saw the background at Bowling Green. I'm like, okay, I feel like I know Michelle, right? The energy, right? That sort of, how does she do it? But you do it, and you do it in such a professional way. Talk a little bit about sort of that regional advantage that I'm going to say that I think you probably have with your very engaging accent.
Well, thanks. So I grew up in Ohio, but I have actually
I'm
been
from Ohio. I was born in Ohio. Where were you born, Michelle?
I'm from
Dayton.
Wilmington, Ohio.
Oh,
Tell me
Dayton,
you know where it
Ohio.
is. No, you're from Dayton?
Yeah.
Oh, right up the road, like
Yeah.
30 minutes away.
Kettering Hospital.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. So I'm an Ohio girl at my core, right? Those Midwestern farm town values. So grateful to my parents for just the way that they raised me. I'm from a very small town, and those small town values and ethics, and it has served me very well. I've been in Charlotte, North Carolina ever since I graduated college. So I've actually now been in North Carolina longer than I was in Ohio, which is so strange because I still sometimes call Ohio home. But I think with the regional advantage, it's a little bit of a slower pace, right? Like, we do business globally. We do business all over the world. I have sat through business meetings in New York City. That is very different than sitting through a business meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina. But it's just such a fun place to be.
Let's talk about your personal relationship with the speaking industry. This notion of sort of falling in and out of love with the work that we do and that we pursue. How is that relationship? What's the arc of that look like over time as you got to know more and more about the nuts and bolts of the industry? Because I kind of can take a wild guess at sort of where we maybe have landed today, sort of the present of where you are. But give me a snapshot of that arc of the relationship you've had personally with the industry.
Yeah, it's actually a really fun story that I just presented to a group of high school students who are getting ready to apply for college. Because, the question I ask them is, how many of you know what you want to do? And they get so intimidated when they don't have those answers. And I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do when I started at Bowling Green, but I always encourage people to have their eyes open and their antennas up, because I think when things resonate with you, that's that inner voice and gut we talked about. I took an interpersonal communications class, which was required, which was public speaking, fancy way of saying public speaking. And it's so uncomfortable for so many people that the counselors actually advise you take it over the summer. They're like, you can take this at community college and
Push
transfer
that to
it.
the summer.
Right. And I'm like, I'm taking a full load. I'm not going to ever take anything over the summer. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the art of communication and influence and persuasion and impact and the ripple effect that that could have. And so I immediately was like, I'm changing my major to communications, and I had no idea what I was going to do with it. But then I started to look back on my life. There's a great book called When God Winks at You, and it's about coincidences in your life. And I started to look back and realized I've always loved speaking. I've always loved to be in front of a crowd. I've always been okay with it, right? It was never uncomfortable. And I think I just love the art of it. And so once I got on that path, everything just fell into place. So I had a communications major, but I minored in marketing because I loved just learning more and more about marketing. And then all of a sudden I was like, I have all these classes, I have a minor. And my good friend Sean Hanks at Premier Speakers Bureau loves to tell the story that I am the only person in the industry who is literally using their college degree every day, right? Like this is people.
You
just
do
fall
wear the
into
crown.
this.
I don't know if I know anybody else that's doing what they pursue.
But that's, I'm applying my major and my minor every day in business.
Okay, so I think that's really important for the audience. I know it is for me. I love to know where people where did the passion sort of first get lit based on what they're doing, right? That says a lot to me about how they probably engage with that industry. Let's talk about evaluating talent. So let's sort of put the agency hat on. I am no doubt that you and me and Marjana, we if we sort of look at our instant messages and emails that we get from people randomly that want sort of, hey, I'd like to get into public speaking. I got one of those about an hour ago. Like, can you tell me what you're doing? How do I do that? It's like, oh, how many hours in the day do I have? But I'm always curious because I think everybody has a different eye for talent. And that some of it is based on the things that we potentially think that we resonate with, because that's a skill set that we have, or that we think it's something that is an absence of our own sort of approach and ability, and there's something novel about that, and so we find great value. How do you look at evaluating talent, and how do you avoid sort of that shiny toy, right? That maybe potential speaker that has everything right, but there's something in the back of your mind that just says, I don't know if it's going to resonate with somebody, right? But you almost wanted to because they have every box checked. So talk a little bit about your evaluation process, and has it taught you anything about sort of your role and enjoyment for this industry?
That's such a great question. I love that one. I always tell people, when you own your own company, you get to choose the people that you work with. And the people that I select to be on our exclusive roster have to be good humans before they're good on stage. That's very important to me. We have curated a family. And when you come on my team, you are family. That's just what we do. It's how we do it. So there has to be a lot of synergy there on connecting with the person long before they're a thought leader, expert, best-selling author. And we do, we have very high standards for our roster. There are certain criteria that people have to meet in order to even be considered. But for me, their reputation has to precede them in the fact that they're easy to work with, great human beings, part of the team, right? Like that's just our culture. That's the culture of our business, and it has to be a good culture fit first. Beyond that, I look at the credibility that they have and what makes them uniquely qualified to deliver their message. So I love that you said like the new shiny thing. That doesn't really hold a lot of weight with me. I look for people who have a lot of depth behind that. I look for people who are industry experts, who have put in the reps, who have, like myself, taken out the trash in the business, right? They've learned all the aspects of that business. They've hustled and grind and done all that stuff because that's what makes them who they are. And a lot of people look at the speaking industry from afar and they see the Ritz-Carltons and the private jets and the big fees and all those things. And That's really not what it is. There's a lot of Best Westerns before you get to the Ritz-Carlton.
I love that.
And I mean, you have to be able to, you have to put in the reps. I remember my teenage son, Connor, is both my kids have just sort of grown up in this industry with me, right? And they
Yeah.
love it and they're very involved in the business, as they will tell you. And when I took Connor to his first National Speakers Association event, he was hobnobbing with all these really top tier speakers, and it was really fun for him. And I will never forget, he said, you know, Mom, the good ones stay humble. And I thought, what a powerful lesson, because you're absolutely right. You know, he's sitting next to people who, you know, their net worth is just insane because of their credibility and what they've done. But they're engaging with my teenage son and they're telling stories about their family and they're so grateful for the work. And I just think that's key. That's
You know what I love about that, Michelle, is that to me is the other side of the coin, or the black and white cookie, right? It's that what's the discussion after most people attend a keynote, which is, how long is this gonna sit with me? Is it gonna stick? Or in 2 days, am I gonna forget that message, but I was sort of caught up in the moment? That to me, it runs parallel to your approach, which is like, I want to be moved by somebody. I want to understand the depth and the quality of them as a human. For people out there who are listening, whether you're a speaker or someone that engages with the ISB, like that to me is the gold that you're talking about, because that is such a differentiator in the market. I personally have been there on calls with people where you're thinking, do you really want to even know sort of who I am, or do you want to know the answer that I can give an audience? And those are two very different things, and that's fine because it's about fit. Now, Marjana, I want to bring you in because, look, I think it's fair to say it's a saturated market, and I think that these are topics that come up across the industry at different levels. What is your perspective on what we're just combing over here?
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. You know, it's interesting. And, you know, Michelle, you know this about me too. I could be very like optimistic and Pollyanna about this industry. I feel like many of us feel everybody has a voice, but where you sit in this industry with that voice is the question that we all have to answer. Right. And Michelle, I know, like, as we're seeing this, the market saturation, I kind of always walk that line of when people call me and they're newer at this, I try to guide them in a way to say, look, you might not be ready for those larger stages, but where do you start in your own community, in your own circle of trust? And that's something, Michelle, like, I wonder, how do you guide people in those conversations? Because I think in the world that we're all living in, we need as many people out there sharing stories and strategies about things that could inspire, even if it's 5 people in your community. You're changing lives, you're creating impact. In the speaking industry, we're doing it at a larger scale, but I want to make sure those voices are always growing. But Michelle, how do we do that in a way where we're not just, again, someone has money to throw at websites and content, but they really haven't been tested in the field, so to speak? How do you navigate those conversations in the most optimistic way?
Yeah, I think there's a speaker for everyone, right? There's, whether it's a stage for 5,000 people or a community group that has 15 people and they still need a lesson. I think there's a place for everyone. And I think what's really key for people entering the speaking business is find out where your people are, right? Find out who you need to really identify, who are the people that will benefit from your message, and find out where those people live and congregate and communicate, right? You have to find your tribe in order to be successful. And you also have to be really relevant. You know, I mean, it's a hard business. Like I said, a lot of people get starry-eyed and they want to come in, but you have to put in the work. You have to put in the reps. You have to hone your craft, and you have to find places where you can just show up and talk and not worry about the fee right away, to just polish your stories and work on your pauses and figure out if it's really resonating with your audience. There's so many things about becoming a professional speaker. I mean, you know, we could talk about that for hours, but I am very optimistic too, and very positive too. We're very kindred spirits, and I wouldn't deter someone. I would just say, you kind of just have to know where to put in the work.
Yeah, and I love that piece of the relevant, right? Because it used to be so much of our industry was evergreen. People would leave the same keynote up for a long time. And yes, you have your umbrella keynote, the main thing. But to your point, you kind of have to read the room, read the headlines, kind of know where you fit. Again, back to like water cooler talk, right, Rod? It's like really finding those stories that are really resonating, that are top of mind for people.
Well, and I love the combination because we're talking about that water cooler element, being relevant and finding your tribe. And how I understand that and sort of digest that, Michelle, is that it's really about it. It's being okay with the opinion that you have, because we could give three different keynotes on the very same topic, and it's going to be our backgrounds, the depth of our experience, and the way in which we engage communities that will then be experienced. It's like notes in a wine, right? We can all be a certain class of wine, but we're going to have different notes based on where in the world we, when we grow up as grapes. And so that's going to change things. But do we have an opinion, and are we okay with that? And if we found a tribe, then it's probably going to resonate, and what I love about that component, I love your perspective on this, is it keeps us away from just feeling like we have to come up with some like facade of an answer, of an approach, of a keynote that makes it meet the need for everybody in the room, or at least that's the hope that we have, because it is saturated and everybody thinks they can be a speaker. But I know, in your role, that's not the case. How do you keep that authenticity with your speakers on an ongoing challenging basis, even when they've made it through sort of or past that threshold that you've got with your exclusive agency? How do you keep them fresh so that their true self, I guess, is expressed on a stage?
Yeah, I think it's really about a constant review. We're
Mm.
constantly reviewing their marketing, their positioning, their topics, how it relates to the marketplace. If something's not resonating, right? Like we might think we have the best keynote in the world, and we're like, why isn't this selling? And
Yeah.
you have to really dig in and go, okay, where are these dots not being connected? Why is this not resonating? But I think, people that say, I have a great keynote and I'm going to deliver this keynote for 20 years will become less relevant 2 years from now, right? You have to constantly be thinking about how your audiences are changing, how the market is changing, how the economy is changing, what is new and exciting for people. And you have to deliver content that's customized and personalized and relevant and really lands with them. But I think for us, to stay fresh, we're just constantly looking at that based on the feedback we're getting from planners on a regular basis.
Talk about the planners and talk about the evolution of that role in the game, or the sort of the board game that is public speaking. Are you finding that their questions, the way in which they engage with you and your contemporaries, is been refined over time? Do you find that they are more diligent in their approach and discerning in the way in which they approach you? How do we understand them? Because really, that relationship is absolutely core, but an audience would never know it prior to seeing somebody on stage.
Yeah, I think the way meeting planners have evolved very quickly over the past 5 years has been an interesting thing in our industry. And I will say that there are some variables, right? You're still going to always have an association where it's a volunteer role, or you're going to have a director of sales or a director of marketing for a smaller company, and they're tasked with finding a speaker. But I think the corporate meeting planners, that's our target audience, the corporate meetings and events planners. Number one, it's a younger demographic than it ever has been. So they have grown up in a world where they've always had technology at their fingertips. They have self-service websites. And so you take that information, just that piece of information, and you tell a speaker, look, if I can't go to your website and get everything I need in the first 10 seconds, they're moving on. Right. So you have to, when I say staying relevant in the marketplace, it's really understanding who your buyer is, so as well as the topics, right? So your website has to be unbelievably easy to navigate. And I need
Yeah.
all of the information that I need to book you at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm in a hotel room at another event, when I'm doing a hotel site visit, right? So it's, meeting planning, it's a very stressful job, and they want us to make it easy for them. Speakers need to be easy to work with. Their information needs to be easily digestible. People need to know, what do they speak on? If you're a leadership speaker, that's great. But what does that mean? right? Like, how do you talk about
There are a few other
leadership?
leadership speakers out there, right?
Right, right. What makes you uniquely qualified to talk about that subject? Um,
Michelle, on that point, on the knowledgeable on that subject, I would be remiss if I didn't sort of pivot to the blind spots that you are seeing from the industry side. Like, what are our blind spots? What are we missing right now that we're not getting? Right? We see there are examples all over industry. It doesn't matter where you are. It's ESPN getting, battled by the micro sort of Bleacher reports where you just pick up your phone and you get to see your team's information, and they're standing there going, "Wait a minute, what happened to our audience?" Where are our blind spots as an industry, and how do we prevent ourselves from just assuming we have the answers because we're the legacy player in this?
oh, that's a good one. I think blind spots can mean different things. I
Okay.
think some blind spots might be if you are an expert on a certain topic. There are other topics that are sort of adjacent that
Uh,
might be a little bit more relevant, right? So if you're only thinking, well, I'm an expert on X, but you're kind of an expert on these 5 things, and those 5 things are what meeting planners are asking for right now. I think that goes back to being able to be flexible and to pivot, right? And always reviewing your positioning and marketing. I think blind spots, a big blind spot for a lot of speakers is that things might not change as quickly as others might think, right? I think there is rapid change right now in the industry. I think there are new buyers, new topics all the time. And if you're not abreast of those changes, if you're not willing to make some tweaks, the speakers that are like, well, I've always done it this way and I've been really successful. Well, that might have worked for 20 years, but it might not work for the next 5. And
right.
so to me, that's a blind spot.
What was the impact that TED Talks have had on the industry? I
Ah,
hear a polarizing views on this in a world that is absolutely saturated, right?
yeah, I would say the biggest effect TED Talks have had, well, 2 things come to mind. One, shortened speaking times, right? Gone are the days of the 90-minute keynote. You have to be able to
How
deliver.
upsetting, right, Michelle?
And I'll tell you, I think that's hard. I think it's way easier to talk for 90 minutes than 20. And people are, we want a TED Talk style keynote. So you have to be able to take all of your expertise that you've delivered for years in 60 to 90 minutes and make it really powerful in 20. I personally think that's really hard. I think that's number one. I also think TED Talks have created a stage for people to tell their story, which is beautiful. But those people are not normally paid professional speakers. And so there might be a little bit of an illusion for planners that they can just get anybody to come tell their story. And that person might not be as well equipped as a paid professional speaker. That's their livelihood. You know, they might hire someone to tell their story and the agenda gets off track and now they need them to go longer or go shorter. Every speaker on my roster can adjust on the fly and you would never know that that's not what they had purposely planned. I don't know that just anyone can do that. And so I think, for me, I'm a big advocate of when you're looking to hire a speaker, look for a speaker that does this professionally. There's a certain credibility that comes with the fact of everything that they've put in through the years.
How do you think you have? I mean, again, I'll say it. You can tell me if I'm way off the ranch here, but I mean, to now be the president of the ISB, to have your own agency, to your words, that boss, right? As you're thinking about the Girl Scouts and that kind of a thing, and all the things that you've achieved. How do you understand your next and how you would evaluate what that might look like come 2026 because of the accomplishments that you've had? Because one of the things I think that's interesting, not just in your specific story, is that a lot of people think in this industry you're either a speaker or you are an agency, right? They don't understand all the different elements and all the valuable pieces that go into this fantastic mosaic that ends up in a 45-minute on stage or condensed into a 20, right? How do you think about what this will do for you as you then think about what your next is? Because you're not slowing down. You know what I mean? You've got a long, long time in this industry, and I'm just curious as to how this will now impact your path forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a business owner, I'm always thinking about what's next. I'm always thinking about what does 5 years look like? What does next year look like? What does next week look like? We've had some fun changes in my own company over the past year. I hired another sales agent, Tracy, and thank you for talking about LA because she's there. And I
Mm.
texted her this morning and just said, oh my gosh, come live with me for a week if you need to. But I I got to that's a really good example of like how you constantly as a business owner need to be looking at growth and what it looks like for you. I was turning away amazing talent because I was only one person and my roster was full. I didn't have the capacity. And so I looked for someone who had industry experience that could maybe help grow the roster. Our goal is never to be big. Our goal is to be boutique and highly credible. But bringing her on has been a fantastic decision. And so that, I'm looking at stuff like that. What can we be doing differently? What can we add? What can we subtract? What does the industry, what is it going to look like in a couple of years? But I think just when I mentioned I'm a lifelong student of the business,
Yeah.
I think I have to stay really current and relevant with everything that's going on in order to know
Michelle,
what's next. Yes.
I just want to add on that. I love that you just shared about Tracy, and hi to Tracy. She's out there watching and thinking of you and everybody out there. But I love that you've done that with the team. I think this is something unique and new that I'm kind of seeing in the industry. And I don't know, right? Bringing someone in to really look at the talent in a different way and take that time. Do you think that more management companies will follow suit in the same way, or how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I don't know. One of the things that I tell speakers when they ask about speaker management, the first thing I say is that we're all different. We're all alike, but we're all very different. And when you're looking to find your home, one of the most important things you need to think about is how each one operates differently. I mean, you have to make sure that whatever agency you're looking at, they are a really good fit for your business. That is what's most important. So,
Yeah.
I think the world is our oyster. I think if someone wants to start a speaker management agency tomorrow, there is a massive need. And I can tell you that because we get inquiries every day from speakers that want to come on board. And so there is a big need for that. I think the industry shifted a bit when bureaus started to do a management side of their agency. That was a really interesting thing, right? An exclusive
Yeah.
arm of bureaus. And then you still have bureaus that are non-exclusive, and you've got all sorts of things popping up that are super different and unique about our industry. That's what I'm most excited about, I think, for IASB this year is how things are changing and how we're working as an organization to be more inclusive to those newer styles of companies.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that are contributing to the industry in unique ways, and it's great that we're opening that up for them for sure. We have Rod. I want to make sure that we have one question in the room too. Do you want me to
Yeah, I
share
was gonna
that? Or
sure.
you can
One of the questions in the room, Michelle, is this, this notion of should we have sort of that set talk, or are those days over? Do we need to be able to pivot and create and address each audience from an organic perspective? And maybe are we forced to do that just because we live in a world of Instagram and we can go live anytime like we are right now? I mean, are we done with that world in that regard?
I don't think we are because I think your signature story or your signature presentation is what makes you who you are. So, my speakers all have a body of work. They have intellectual property that they've curated over the years that makes them an expert on that subject. What they do is customize it and personalize it for every audience. And I will say, if you are not doing that as a speaker, you're not going to be invited back. You're really not. I mean, if you have to be able to connect the dots for every audience and put your information in their words, in their brain, you have to literally connect the dots for them in their business. And that's elevated work, right? But that's what makes the good ones really good.
Does that
But I
extend into those sort of consulting opportunities post keynote and an opportunity on stage where those clients then say, hey, we want to bring you back in, speaker, because you really resonated with our group. It feels like we're doing more of that. And I'm also hearing where people are saying on the agency side, I've got to drum it into my speakers. Like, you've got to be prepared for that, because if you do a really great job, that's probably going to be the follow-up request.
Yeah, and I think I don't think you have to be a consultant to be a speaker. I think there are
Good
ways
point.
that you can package your content and chunk it out and make it deliverable for people. A great example of this, and COVID really changed the world for us on this, right? I might sell a keynote and then ask what's going to happen 30 days later. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, my speaker is going to give you all of this information to change your company, but like, how are you going to implement it 30 days later? And they're stunned, right? They maybe haven't thought about that. Well, what if we come back and we do a 30-minute accountability webinar and we get everyone back in and we start doing, what if we just do Q&A 60 days from now on a Zoom?
So some of them, and what I'm hearing, some of the role that you have and the industry has is in educating
Oh yeah.
that planner, right? The event planners, and also that potential client on the breadth and depth of what all of us can offer.
I think I've always been wired that way, right?
Mm.
So I think that's probably one of the reasons my agency is what it is I'm very consultative in my approach with planners. I don't want to just do one keynote. I want to make a customer for a lifetime. So I want to know, where their pain points are and how we can help and what resources I have that we can help with that.
I love that, because it's not transactional, right? We're not selling widgets. This is about developing relationships through story and experience and legacy. Mirjana, I know that we're coming up on our time, so I want to be mindful of that. I also want to thank, we're doing sort of a new thing here with Stories in the Room with Rig Productions, and want to thank the guys behind the scenes on this, and hope the audience likes how we're taking it up a notch. But I want to pass it over to you, Mirjana, as we sort of wrap up here. Mirjana, you are muted.
There you go. Someone had to tell me. Thank you. I
thought, well, we'll let this ride for a second. Isn't that mean of me, Michelle? I'd literally let her.
Nice. Come on. Don't leave me hanging. All right. I was saying a big thanks to you, Rod, for introducing us to the partnership with Rig. Thank you so much. Thank you to Garrett and Brian behind the scenes and that whole team. And, Michelle, I just love so much of what you said. And it just really is accountability, partnership, co-creation, collaboration. I know we're seeing it in the industry. We're breaking down more silos. The association is such a big part of this, bringing our community together in a bigger way, creating these co-creators together. And I'm just so grateful again for how you have led in this industry. I know when I first met you a few years back, you were just the warmth and your energy and your availability to us for questions, for inspiration. It makes a difference. And I just hope that more of our colleagues in the industry, step up to share in the same way that you have and in their own light, and that we continue to elevate and grow together. So thank you so much for your leadership in all of this.
And I want to add, Mirjana, one thing that just came to me as you were saying that. What I love already about Michelle is that you do not represent a gatekeeper. And I think that people that are watching, people that experience any industry, it feels like people in your position would act as if you were the gatekeeper. And I don't get that at all. And I think that is so refreshing that there is an openness to you. It doesn't mean you don't have high standards and that you're going to create a moat and you're going to create the best offering you can, but you are open to the conversation and you're open to giving somebody the opportunity to share where their value sits, probably or hopefully within your ecosystem. And that is something you just can't teach.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And I mean, Rod, as always, you are just incredible at how you just, peel back the layers, right? Michelle, I think there was like a lot of good stuff here. Sometimes I'm like, where do you source this stuff? What did you do?
Well, thank you. I'm sorry I left you hanging there, Mirjana, on mute. That was so mean of me.
I mean, really, play nice next time, would you?
I know,
Thank you all. And we're going to be, just to say, we're going to be doing these twice a month right now, right, Rod? So we're looking forward to bringing more opportunities of conversations with great industry leaders. If you have been watching, have questions for any in particular, or questions here for Michelle, just drop them back in comments and we'll follow up with Michelle on them. And if you want to hear from other industry leaders that you know about, or you want to elevate someone in this space, definitely DM us and we'll be able to reach out to them. But for now, thank you both for this incredible conversation and stories in the room.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.